Welcome back to Weekly Briefing. We are here with our panel of experts. Joining me in studio, and the only male on the panel this week, that was not intentional, Chris Farrell, Director of Investigations at Judicial Watch and author of Exiled Emissary, George Earl III. Dr. Shay Bradley Farrell, President of Counterpoint Institute for Policy, Research, and Education. Donna Jackson, Accountant and Director of Member Development at Project 21. And Chanel Rion, One America's Chief White House Correspondent. The Biden administration, the same group of people who supported defunding the police, have now developed a $1 billion grant for anyone who can think of ways to stop violent crime.
That the Department of Justice announced today that they'll be awarding $1.6 billion in grants to support a range of initiatives to reduce violent crime and make our communities safer. This money will help address the surge in gun violence that we've seen over the last 2 years and will bolster steps that the administration has already taken to crack down on violent crime.
Chanel, for some reason, I don't think this money is going to go to local police forces.
Historically, under this administration, whenever they talk about community policing, the definition is so broad. You have community policing initiatives that include ice cream socials in New Jersey, and initiatives that really have zero and nothing to do with fighting crime, indicating the flailing morale that we're seeing in the police departments now. You look at the New York Police Department, and they just conducted an internal poll where I believe it was 79% of those polled do not believe that conditions in New York City are going to improve in the next 2 years. And this is also tragic. Of the 6,000 New York City Police Department officers that were polled, half of them, more than half of them, regretted ever joining the police force to begin with. And this was an internal poll that was just conducted just this week. So this administration does not know what it's talking about when it comes to policing or mitigating crime, and it is showing in the police forces down the line and in our busiest city.
That is really tragic and disheartening. Donna, what do you think of grant money to try to combat violent crime?
The damage has already been done. Listen, we had this summer of love that was smashing and grabbing and destroying major metropolitan cities. And did they really think that they were going to put this rabbit back in a box after their guy got in office? No. The same people that were beholden to destroy cities in America are still beholden to do the same. And it doesn't matter how much money they throw at the program, because police officers have already been vilified. There's already a stigma to anyone who's even thinking about joining the police department. So they have to live with the consequences that they created, and this is going to take years.
Well, and you're an accountant. $1 billion, you don't even have to be an accountant to know. That's like kind of a lot of money. Do you think it will be used well?
Well, this is a payday for someone that we don't even know about. Just like the housing. I was actually talking to somebody about the housing. They have a rental property. They never got paid for having someone in their apartment that hasn't paid in 2 years, and they've learned that the money is gone, is vanished.
It's astonishing and infuriating. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin issued a statement this week stating that he would not support the Build Back Better bill, which seems to be the end of Biden's opportunity. Shay, what do you think about Joe Manchin saving America?
I mean, thank God that there is a sane Democrat in Congress.
There's one. There is one.
On this point, who happens to be the tipping point on this issue, right? And he's exactly right. I mean, we've got $29 trillion of debt already that is actually hindering us from addressing COVID as well as we could. It's hindering us from addressing supply issues and the exorbitant inflation right now. And they want to add another, Democrats say, $2 trillion to this debt, but the Congressional Budget Office actually says it's more like $4.5 trillion. And here's the thing, the real intent of this legislation is to pass as many far leftist social and economic policies that they can. It's a total reshifting of our society. That's the point.
Jen Psaki immediately responded in a very vitriolic way, saying that this was a total shock to the White House. They couldn't believe Manchin was worried about our deficit because it's all paid for. But that was based off of the White House's naive belief belief that once you give birth to a bureaucratic spending program, that somehow it will exist and then vanish in thin air. And anyone who's dealt in D.C. knows that a bureaucracy that once born is like a cockroach. It never dies.
And he seemed very, like, it was a matter of his conscience. He said he tried everything he could to help them, and he just couldn't do it. He had to stand before his own people in West Virginia. So I give him credit.
Joe Biden knows what we all should know. Inflation on gasoline was deliberate so that they can push the Green New Deal. What they thought is that if they raise inflation on gasoline and home energy costs, that people were going to flock to solar panels and
Wind
electric
energy,
vehicles, but they didn't. Two-thirds, three-fourths of all American vehicles are SUVs and trucks.
Right.
They don't want these small electric vehicles.
They bought guns, not windmills. Taiwan is battling Chinese espionage attacks. New reports show that China has penetrated Taiwan's military. What options does Taiwan have against an aggressive China? Chris.
This is a fascinating topic and my particular specialty in my misspent youth as a counterespionage officer. So there's a few things going on with this story. Number one, espionage in and of itself is not always just stealing secrets. It's also conducting influence operations, right? It's gaining access to leaders, both active and retired, at senior echelons in the government and in the military and in civil society generally. And there's an effort to manipulate decision-making and interfere with the process of government. And the communist Chinese are enormously successful in doing that. The other thing that's very important in this case is that this article alone, by itself, is an influence operation. It is meant to really disturb and demoralize and to drive down confidence in the people of Taiwan about their government and their military. Because it basically says, hey, look, you're completely compromised. There's no hope. You can't stand up to the Chinese. And those two factors, espionage and stealing secrets is one thing, undermining and seditiously and subversively undermining confidence in the government and the military is the other part of this.
So what can Taiwan do at this point? Because they're still in this kind of unidentified position. But to your point, I do think that freedom is always a stronger option. So what can they do to maintain their freedom?
The Taiwanese government has a very aggressive sort of counter-subversion program where they have everything from soap operas to adventure mystery series. It's government-sponsored sort of public outreach or sort of a counter-propaganda mode to encourage the Taiwanese citizen that all is not lost and know the Chinese aren't going to, the communists aren't going to take over. And so there's a sort of an official effort to do that, to educate the public and inform them and motivate them in a propagandistic, and I mean that in a good sense, way of encouraging their people. And then they're also bringing down the hammer, right? They're doing prosecutions. They're running a very active counterespionage investigation and prosecution program so that people that get sucked into this, and look, for the most part, you know, it's really about money, right? That's what it really drives a lot of this. And so they're trying to prosecute them.
Imagine that, prosecuting people who commit crimes against your nation. That's a fascinating idea. When we come back from the break, we'll discuss how Instagram empowers pedophiles. We'll be right back.